Hi, my name is Richard Cassavant. I'm one of the authors to the Boston Rules, Building Relationships Like a Dog. I'm going through a series of presentations and keynotes in terms of topics, and you probably have heard me speak on a number of rules that have to do with the customer service culture of your company. It's called WAGs to Welcome. Today I'd like to start a new series or a new topic which is called Leader of the Pack. This has to do with the management and the leadership issues within companies. After 25 years of organizational development consulting, in many of the companies you've heard it said many times, I don't leave companies, I leave managers. And so the incredible responsibility about being a leader or being a manager in terms of affecting other people's lives goes a long way in this rule. What does it have to do with business? It has to do with everything with business, because when we look at focus on the positive, which is the rule we're going to talk about today, rule number 3, it has to do with looking at both sides of the issue. And for the most part, focus on the positive is one of my favorite rules, because as I was raising my 2 young boys, there were a number of techniques that I used in order to go ahead and help them build resiliency skills against the world, if you will. But Leader of the Pack has 4 rules in it. The first one is focused on the positive. We'll talk about that in just a couple minutes. The second one is rule number 5, run with the right pack. Basically, you're the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. When it comes to leadership, that gets to be very important. There's rule number 10, take time to rest and play. A lot of times people become workaholics, or they'll stay till 9 or 10 simply because the boss does, and it tears their personal lives up as well. I'll share a story with you about my son and a decision that he made that I was very proud of. And then the last rule is have great expectations. And that when it comes to the idea of performance appraisals, most of us go in there thinking we're going to be told what it is that we have done wrong and what we need to do is improve. And I believe on the complete opposite, because you get what it is that you focus on. So let's go back to rule number 3, focus on the positive. Here's what I have to say about that. It is hard. Focusing on the positive is one of the hardest things that we have to do. We have to work at it because our brains are wired to remember and to recall the things that did not work so we don't make the same mistake again. It's the basic psychology behind fight and flight. If you're going down to a water hole and you know there's an alligator in the water, you're very cautious because the last time you went down there, you saw an alligator or a crocodile get one of the animals coming right out of the water, pulling it in and killing it. And we remember those things. They're for our survival. So that's why it's very difficult for us to focus on the positive. And I'll tell you another reason why it's difficult. If you only look around the world today, you turn on the news, you turn on the radio, you grab a newspaper, or you sit down and talk with somebody at lunch, most of the time you'll be talking about what isn't working, how bad things are, things that you don't like. The negative is easy for us to build conversation around. When I was a troubleshooter for Stouffer Hotels, my job was to go in, take a department, fix it, turn it around, give it back to the hotel, better than it was, and I was to leave. One of my strategies in terms of understanding my style in terms of communicating and what kind of manager I would be in the turnaround was that I would not eat lunch with anyone who had something bad to say about the hotel or the department that we were in or anything in general. I usually ate alone for 21 days. It's about 3 weeks. I'd walk by people and they say, what is he? Oh, he's the guy who's turning around this department or whatever. And he would sit down and he would eat all by himself. He eats all by himself. The reason I didn't want anybody talking negative at the table, because I wanted people to understand that it's not what's not working that I'm going to be looking at. I'll note it, but it's not what I'm going to be focusing on. So that was a technique that I used, and I used it on the boys as well. I raised 2 wonderful boys. One lives in Colorado, the other in Virginia. Now, when they were growing up, many of us now understand the issue of bullying and stuff, and it was a big issue back then, but it wasn't as socially acceptable to talk about it. So when the boys would come home and they would say something like, Dad, you know, kids call me a nerd. And I would say, a nerd? Well, how do you feel about that? And they would talk to me about how they felt about it, and it usually wasn't very good. So we started turning those words around. we started looking at how is it that I could take that word and flip it around so that it teaches them to focus on the positive. And so we came up with, what is a nerd? A nearly educated radical dude. What's a jerk? A junior educated radical kid. And that flip side, if you will, is a technique of learning how to turn circumstances that most people see as negative into positive. And I'll tell you something, when you choose to look at the positive, chances are you will be alone, like I was for 21 days eating by yourself. Most people don't like it. And so when it comes to focusing on the positive, one of the things that I started with companies was that when people say, Richard, you're so positive, or this is such a positive experience, I defined positive. I said, is it professional? Is it optimistic? Is this person sensible, inquisitive, trusting, interested, valued, empathetic? We broke the word positive down into these kinds of things so that we could define what they look like in the workplace, so that when somebody is positive, you know they are professional, competing with themselves to be the best that they can be, not competing with anybody else. We looked at the idea of optimistic, the optimistic, the ability to see through the mist, to see what is not there. We looked at the idea of being sensible, knowing that things would take some time. And so we looked at this word in terms of these elements, given this mnemonic, if you will, and it was a really great place to begin talking to people about focusing on the positive. Why I bring that up as a rule in the Boston Rules, building relationships like a dog, because we are more apt to praise and encourage our dogs, good boy, good girl, when they do what it is that we're looking for, rather than our kids sometimes. How much better would it be for our kids if we said, thank you for coming to the table within 5 minutes when I said dinner was ready. Thank you for giving me a call when you knew you were going to be a little bit late, because you know how I worry. The whole idea of thank you for coming home when you said that you would. When we start focusing on the positive, we're going to get more of that, because positive reinforcement, as it relates to dog training, also relates to building relationships like a dog. Esther and Jerry Hicks have written an incredible book, a series of books called The Law of Attraction. And in there they have something called an emotional scale. And an emotional scale is 21 different emotions that we move through within our days or weeks. And so when you start looking at the emotional scale, one of the things that you want to do is move up on it. So when we blame somebody for something, meaning that we see ourselves as a victim, I would rather move that up on the positive emotional scale to disappointment. Rather than blame somebody, it's disappointment. Barclay's disappointed with somebody right now. So when we look at the idea of being positive on that emotional scale, how would you push positive up? You would push positive toward an enthusiastic and a passionate response. So when it comes to focusing on a positive, rule number 3 in the book, Building Rules Like a Dog, or Building Relationships Like a Dog, what it tells and helps us to do is that through this focus on the next step beyond the situation in terms of looking for the positive, it will help us, it will help you to create a kinder, more accepting world by creating kinder, more accepting relationships. That's rule number 3, focus on the positive, one of 4 rules under the presentation of the keynote topic called Leader of the Pack.